everyone. In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make this lacy shell stitch, or fan stitch you might prefer to call it. It's a mixture of V's and shells. It will make an absolutely beautiful scarf or blanket, but depending on the yarn that you choose to use, if you used quite a thin yarn, then it would make a really beautiful summery lightweight blanket for a baby. This one has been done in Caron Simply Soft, and this shade is called Soft Green. It's a beautiful colour and it looks really nice in this particular yarn, especially because it has a nice sheen to it, as does all of the Caron Simply Soft. But as I say, you can use absolutely any yarn that you wish and whatever size hook that particular yarn recommends. However, I personally choose to go up half a hook size for whatever the yarn recommends. So the Caron Simply Soft recommends a 5mm, but I'm actually going to be using a 5.5mm, just because, as I say, I want it to be quite lacy, quite open. But if you want it to be slightly tighter, then obviously use the recommended stitch hook size for your yarn. But as I say, I'm going to just go up half a size. So as always, you're going to start with a slip knot, and if you're not sure how to do that, then just nip across and check out my Absolute Beginner series. Now for the foundation chain for this particular pattern, you want to do it in a multiple of 6. So as wide as you want your project to be, just make sure it's a multiple of 6. So to chain, obviously you just yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through. So if you want to complete your foundation chain, and I will meet you back in just a minute. So I've completed my foundation chain now, and I've just double checked, and it is definitely a multiple of 6. So now you want to add on an additional 4 chains to whatever length you have done. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then we're going to work into the 4th chain from the hook, so you never count the one that's on your hook. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and this is my 4th stitch just here. And into that 4th stitch I'm going to do a treble. So that's UK treble, US double. So you want to yarn over, insert your hook into that 4th stitch, yarn over and pull up, and you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So that chain 3 that we've skipped will count as a treble, and the treble we've done. So we've got 2 trebles now pretty much in that very same stitch. We're now going to skip 2 stitches on our foundation chain, so we're going to skip 1 and 2, and then into the 3rd stitch we're going to do our first shell. So a shell is just going to consist of 5 trebles all in the same stitch. So skip 2, yarn over, insert into that 3rd stitch, yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's 1 in that space, and we want 4 more all into that very same chain. So yarn over, pull up, pull through 2 and pull through 2. So that's 2, 3, 4 and 5. So we've got 5 trebles all into that same chain space. We're then going to skip 2 stitches again, so we're going to skip 1 and 2, and into that 3rd stitch we are going to do 2 trebles. So yarn over and insert and do 2 trebles. So that's 1 and 2, and then again skip 2 trebles and do a shell stitch into the 3rd. So remember, that's just 5 trebles all into the same space. Two, 3, 4 and 5. And then again you're going to skip 2 stitches, so 1, 2, and then 2 trebles together in that 3rd stitch, and you're going to just continue that all the way along your foundation row. You're going to skip 2, do a shell, skip 2 and do 2 trebles, skip 2 and a shell, and you're just going to do that all the way along, and I will meet you as you get towards the end of your row. I'm just getting back towards the other end now, so I've just done a shell stitch and then I've got 2 chains to skip and then 1 final chain here to work my last stitches into. So you should be finishing on the 2 trebles in the same stitch. So whatever you start with in this pattern, you should finish with as well. So 2 trebles into that final stitch. And this is how your work should be looking. Don't worry if it curls slightly and looks a little bit lumpy, that's absolutely normal. It's absolutely fine. So that is your foundation row complete, and we're going to move on to the next row. So you want to chain 1 and turn, and then in between this, the 2 trebles here, so you can see you've got the 2 trebles right next to each other, and you're going to work in between those stitches. And we're going to start with a half shell. So to do a half shell, you want to do 3 trebles. So you're going to yarn over, insert in between those 2 trebles, and you're going to do 3 trebles. So that's 1, 2, and 3 worked in between those 2 trebles, and it will push your trebles apart slightly and almost create like a V-stitch. You then want to skip over to your center treble. So you can see you've got your 5 trebles, and you want to skip the first 2 trebles, and we're going to work a V-stitch. We're going to work our 2 trebles into that middle treble. So you want to yarn over, insert into the top of that middle treble, making sure you've got the V. Make sure you go through the whole of the stitch, and you will do 2 trebles. So that's 1, and back into the same stitch, and that's 2. And then again you're going to skip to where you've got your 2 trebles, and you will do a full shell this time, obviously because we're not on the edge. You'll do a full shell in between those stitches. So you want to do your 5 trebles all in between those 2 trebles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's 5 trebles in between those 2 trebles from the previous row. And again you're going to skip over to your center treble in your shell stitch and do 2 trebles into the top of that middle treble. That's 1 and 2 worked into the center treble in that shell. And again you'll then skip down into the in between your 2 trebles and do a shell stitch, and you're just going to continue that all the way along, and I will meet you just as you've done your 2 trebles into the top of the center one at the very end here. So I've just completed my 2 trebles into my center stitch, and then I'm back at the end again now. And if you remember, we always want to start and finish our row in the same way. So we started here with a half shell, so that means we need to finish with a half shell, and we will work that half shell in between these final 2 trebles. So remember, you've got 1 proper treble and then the chain stitches that we skipped at the beginning, but you're going to work into that space, and you're going to do your half shell, which is your 3 trebles. So 1, 2, and 3. So that is your second row completed, and that is how you should be looking. So you can see you're starting to get the definition of the pattern now. So to move on to the next row, so After we finish this row, it is just that same pattern repeat. You will repeat rows 2, so the row we've just completed is row 2, and then you will repeat the next row. So we're moving on to row 3 now, so this is the second part of our pattern repeat. So you want to chain 3. Now remember, obviously if you were changing colours each row or whatever, you would just change colours as per my colour changing video, and then you would chain 3 and move on. So if you wanted to change colours, that is what you will need to do. So I've chained 3 and I have turned. We are going to create a V, one of our, well, they're not actually V stitches because we're obviously not chaining anything in between them, but we're going to create our 2 trebles here. So our chain 3 counts as a treble, and then in the very base of that stitch where we've just come up from, just here, you'll do another treble. So into that very first stitch just here, you will do a treble, and that is going to count obviously as our 2 trebles to work into later. We're then going to skip across to our 2 trebles just here. So we're going to skip the rest of that half shell, and we're going to create a shell stitch in between those 2 trebles. So that is your 5 trebles. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and we're going to work across now in exactly the same way as before, by skipping to the center treble and doing your 2 trebles. So that's 1 and 2, and then again you're going to skip to your 2 trebles and complete a shell stitch. Just want to apologise if the lighting's not particularly good today, but it's a very, very wet and miserable day outside, and unfortunately there's no substitute really for natural light at times. That's 4 and a final 1, and you're just going to work that now all the way across, doing your shell in between your 2 trebles from the previous row, and then your 2 trebles on top of your center treble, and you're going to work that all the way along. And again, I will meet you just as you get back towards the other end and go from there. So I've just completed a shell stitch in between those 2 trebles, and I'm back to the end now where I've got my half shell from the previous row. So what you want to do is you want to skip the stitches at the top of the first 2 trebles. So you're going to skip the top of this one and the top of this one, and then the very end stitch, right on the very end, you're going to work your 2 trebles. So remember, you're going to skip 1 and 2, and then into that very end stitch just here you work your 2 trebles. So 1 and back into that same space, 2. So that now is how it's looking as it's working up, and you can see it's a really lovely open pattern, and like I say, depending on the yarn and the hook size that you choose to use, it will be even more open the larger the hook that you use. So that is it for the row repeats. So now you would just repeat row 2 again, where you simply chain 1 and turn, and you start by creating your half shell in between these 2 trebles. But if you want to rewind now to where we started, row 2, and you will literally just repeat rows 2 and 3 over and over again until your project is as long as you want it to be. So like I say, I've worked up a few more rows in this particular yarn here that I've started for a scarf, and you can see just how lovely it looks. The more and more that it is worked up, it would make such a beautiful baby blanket. I'm really tempted to make one in a really nice white that has a lovely sheen to it, because I think that would look gorgeous. But this one, like I say, is in like a very pale minty green, but it looks really, really lovely. But that is it for this tutorial. I really hope that you've enjoyed it, and as always, come and find me on Instagram and tag me in any things that you make from any of my tutorials. but I will see you for another one very, very soon. Thanks as always for watching. Bye for now.